Hello, welcome to a new lesson in the C# for Beginners playlist. Today we are not going to learn a new lesson, instead we are going to build a practical application with what we learned so far. So it's not going to be anything fancy or something, but it will try to make use of the new concept that we learned recently, specifically classes. My idea for this app, to keep it simple, was to try to emulate a phone operator company at a basic level. So, how is an application like this built? Well, before we jump straight to code, we need to do a bit of planning, a bit of exploring, a bit of design and architecture. Yes, even for such a small application, because the sooner you get used to this mindset, the sooner you'll become a better engineer. You'll still do mistakes, but they will be fewer than they could be. Therefore, first we need to understand what's called the business requirements. And for you as a beginner, probably the first thing that might sound strange is the word business, because I myself am a self-taught engineer and I remember reading those words more than a decade ago and thinking, what business? I'm not a businessman, I don't want to do any business. I'm a programmer, I just love to code, I want to code. But in fact, I had no idea what I was talking about, obviously. The reason we talk about business in software engineering is the fact that yes, predominantly software is written for businesses, for companies, in order to make money. But even if you don't make money from it, it's still rooted in some business, in some domain. So I could say that I'm in the business of printing t-shirts, and whether I sell them or I give them for free is totally irrelevant. I need a software that knows how to control my printer. So in this case, my domain of activity, my business requirements are a program that knows how to print stuff. In the same spirit, the business requirements we are facing now and trying to emulate the phone company are: we have clients. Clients have unique numbers, so we don't have two clients with the same phone number, obviously. Clients can buy credit. We have a pay-per-minute phone call rate. Clients can call each other and they are billed accordingly with the pay-per-minute rate. And when they don't have enough credit, clients are no longer able to call each other. This is what a business expert, a person that knows how to run a phone company, would tell us when we'd have the first meetings. The next stage is to put everything into code. Usually in large applications, this is where a software architect would come and think about the big parts of the application. How they interact with each other, what the right tools are, countless pieces that make up the entire picture. In our case, since this is a small app, we only need to focus on how do we split the code. And since we are using object-oriented programming, which tries to emulate the real world into code with the help of objects which are created from classes, if in the real world we have a client, we also need a similar class with the name of client. And because we have multiple clients, we need to store them in some sort of a collection, probably an array. So this array also needs to be stored somewhere, therefore we need another class called a phone manager or phone company or whatever we want to call it. Finally, would it make sense to have any other class for the business concepts that the experts described? Well, let's see what else was there. We had the calls, but those go in the phone company class. We had credit, but that goes in the client class. And we had the rule that the client cannot call another client if they don't have enough credit, but there's just a check in the call method. So I guess not. We don't have any other extra classes. So let's start coding. First, let's add the client class. Let's right click on the project, add class. We give it a name, client. Let's convert it to a file scope namespace to indentate one level less. Then we need to add a property for the phone number, which needs to be unique, and we should not be able to first create a client without a phone number, so it needs to be required in some way, and we learned this when we talked about properties. And also we don't want to change the phone number once it's set, so a client, theoretically in the real world we can change our phone numbers, but let's assume that for the purpose of this lesson we cannot change it. So we use required to force whoever wants to use this class to give a value to this property, and init to not be able to modify it after it's set. Then we also need the property to store the credit. And let's also get rid of the unused usings. Next, let's add a phone operator class. So again, add class, give it a name, remove these. Next, we need to add a collection that will hold our clients. And you might be tempted to just do a public property of client array type and perhaps even make it static because it makes sense. So we have a single phone operator, it's unique, we don't need an instance to access that array, so we could access it in a static fashion. But let's think about it for a moment. If we have a public property, that means that everyone, everywhere has access to that array, which means they can add elements, they can set existing elements to null, they can resize it, they can do whatever they want. And that breaks something that is called encapsulation. We will discuss about it on this channel at some point. But the idea is the outside world should not have access to modify internal stuff of this company. Not only that, but we also have a business rule, if you remember, that we should not allow the external world to add a client with the same phone number as an existing client. And we could do that validation in the setter of the property, but given that the property is not a good idea anyway, we should have first a field, a private field, and let's hard code it with 10 places, it's enough for our example, and a public method to add elements, to add clients to this field. Next, we need to add a pay-per-minute phone call rate, and we could use a field for that too, but this time the clients also need to know the pay-per-minute because they need to know how much they'll pay for their phone call. So instead, we will use a property because that's how we expose stuff to the outside world, as you already know. But the way it is written right now is not ideal because it's get set. Everyone can set it from anywhere, which means anyone can set their own phone call rate, which is not allowed. So let's make it read-only and let's give it a default value. And now we need to keep track of how many clients we have because the array says right now that we have 10 available places, but we don't know how many of them are filled. So we could iterate the array every single time and check how many positions are filled, how many are null, but that's not efficient. Instead, we will use a field to keep track of that. So, and we can use it to do checks like this. Now we need to give an error. I'm not the biggest fan of throwing exceptions, I much rather prefer the result pattern, but for the simplicity of this tutorial, let's throw an exception. Another option would have been to just return a boolean to indicate whether the client was added or not. We'll use that in other places. Now let's create the client. And for the credit, let's say that when a client registers with the company, a new contract, they receive 100 credit. And let's add it to the array. And for this, we use the current client count because it's 0 based, just like the array is 0 based. So we can use that one to indicate the position. But now we also need to increment this current client count because the next time will be the same place if we don't. So at this point, we can add the method to make a phone call. So, but this time let's return a boolean like we just said. So what do we need to make a phone call? We need a caller and we need a receiver. So 2 phone numbers. But we also need to know how long the call was because we need to bill it. So, and now we need to find the clients with the specified phone numbers, and because we need to find the caller and we need to find the receiver, so multiple times when we need to look up into the client's array, let's make a dedicated method for that so we don't repeat the code. And what do we need in order to find a client in an array? Well, since it's an array and has places, we need to iterate it. And we need to iterate until when? Until the current client count, how many clients we have registered. And now we can do checks to see if the iterated client matches the phone number of the client we want to find. So, but we still have an error because not all call paths return a value. We do return a client when we find it, but what if we don't find it? So, but returning null is not recommended here because we said we return a client, not a nullable client. So as we learned in the lesson about nullable reference types, we need to return a nullable client, and now we can call this method. And we can do checks. And now we have the caller and the receiver, and we can start checking the phone call rate and etc. So the total cost is the number of minutes multiplied by the cost of 1 minute. But we need to also check if the caller has enough credit to make this total cost payment. And since the credit is declared in the client class, that's also where we need to perform this check. And here we simply check if the available credit is greater or at least equal to the cost of this call. Now we can subtract the total cost of the phone call from the caller's credit, and since credit is defined in the client class, again that's where we need to put the method to subtract this total cost. And here we simply decrement the credit property. And now we simply need to add some logging to let the users of our application know that the phone call was successful. And you may have noticed that first we are using interpolation, we learned about it in past lessons, and we are using this formatting thing, which simply tells the program to only display the 2 decimals after the decimal separator, after the dot. Now we have a way to make phone calls, but remember we also need a way to recharge the credit, because if it just goes down, eventually it will run out and they will not be able to make new phone calls. And since again the credit is in the client class, that's where we need to define the method to increment it. So and here we simply check if the amount we want to recharge with is positive, because it doesn't make sense to recharge it negatively, and then we increment the credit. But here we need to call it, because again, remember, the clients are put in an array that is private. We have no access to it from the outside world, which means only the phone operator class has access to that array, and only in this class we are able to find the client and call methods on it and so on. So again, we need another method here that will call the method to recharge on the client that is found. And now we again search for a client by the phone number. If it's found, we call the recharge credit on the client that was found, and then we print some error or success messages. At this point, our application is kinda done, but of course we need a way to interact with it. So let's add a menu. First, let's print some information about the application. And then, of course, we need an instance of PhoneOperator, because that's where our clients are stored. So let's do that and also add a few test clients just for the sake of it. And now we need to display the menu. But if you remember from past lessons where we had practical applications, console applications need to repeatedly display the menu until the user chooses one of the right available options. So we need an infinite loop. And now we can display the menu itself. With the user input, now we need to switch it to see what option the user chose. So but if you remember, in PhoneOperator, when we add a user, we are returning void in case of error. So we are not returning a boolean, we are throwing an exception. So in case that exception happens, we need to catch it here. And now we can add a client. For the next case, to make a phone call, we need to repeat the process. So And now we need to collect the duration of the call in minutes as a number, as an integer. And if you remember from the lesson about casting and type conversion, we can use the try parse method like this. Now let's look again in the phone operator, and let's see that the make call method returns a boolean in case of error. So we don't need a try catch this time, and we need to handle the if. The remaining option to recharge is just repeating the process. There will be one option 4 that I will leave for you as a homework. So the option 2, display all clients, is as a homework for you left. So now we need to do the menu to exit the application. And also treat the cases where the user enters an option that is not available, is not correct. At this point, we need a way to pause the application after the user enters an option before they can enter the next one. So we use a read key that waits for the user to press some key, and after that we clear the screen so we don't see the previous options, but the loop will just reprint the menu. So let's run it. And let's add a client. First, let's try to add an invalid one, like for example, an empty phone number. And it's perfect. Now let's try to add an existing client. If you remember, we have the client with 111.222, so let's try to re-add it. Oh, it worked. It added it even though it exists. So let's see what's wrong. Oh, we are just checking if the array is filling, but we are not actually checking if the client already exists. So let's do that. And again, we are using the find client method to check if the client already exists. And if it does, we throw an exception. So let's try again. Number already exists. Super. Now let's try to add a valid client. Super. Now let's check if the phone calling works. And it seems to work. Nice. Now let's recharge the credit. This also seems to work. Nice again. And let's exit the application. And this also works. So again, for you, the remaining option to display all clients is on the table. So as you can see, classes quite complement all we've learned so far, and they allow us to really think in code the same way we think about the real world. Anyway, that was all for today. If you enjoyed what you saw, don't forget to like and subscribe because it helps the channel to grow. And until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next tech frame.